The sound of the playground filled the air, children laughing, swings creaking, and the soft thud of small feet running across the grass. Harper, my beautiful daughter, was in her element, her laughter ringing out as she climbed the jungle gym with a determination I had always admired. Despite her disability, her spirit was unstoppable, and every day she conquered her own limitations, finding joy in the simplest of things. It was supposed to be a normal afternoon, one of those moments when everything felt perfect. But then, the world shattered. A single, deafening shot echoed through the playground, the crack of gunfire slicing through the air. My heart dropped into my stomach as I turned toward Harper, who was now crumpling to the ground. Time seemed to freeze as I ran toward her, my body moving before my mind could fully comprehend what had just happened. I reached her just in time to see the shock in her eyes, the blood already beginning to pool beneath her. Karen stood at the far end of the playground, her cold eyes fixed on Harper's trembling form. She held the gun in her hand, her fingers still gripping it with a disturbing calm. I couldn't make sense of it. Karen, the woman who had always been nothing more than a nuisance, the overbearing HOA president who constantly interfered in our lives, had just shot my daughter. "What have you done?" I screamed, my voice cracking with disbelief and fear. But Karen just looked at me, an almost satisfied smile on her lips, as if she had just performed some sort of twisted justice. She needed to be taught a lesson, she said, her tone eerily detached, as if her actions made perfect sense. "She's a disruption, just like you. It's time you learned your place." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was hold Harper, trying to stop the bleeding, praying she would hold on. Why would Karen do this? What had driven her to such madness? But as I looked at Karen, standing there so calmly, it all became painfully clear. This wasn't just about a playground, a gunshot, or a dispute. This was about control. And Karen had gone too far. The playground was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where Harper could forget about the world's expectations and just be a kid. With her disability, every simple task could feel like a mountain to climb, but when she was on that playground, she was free. The swings had become her kingdom, the jungle gym her castle, and every step she took on that soft, green grass was one more victory against the challenges she faced daily. Harper had cerebral palsy, a condition that affected her motor skills and made her muscles stiff. But it never stopped her. She didn't let it dictate her life, and neither did I. She had worked so hard for every ounce of strength, learning to walk, run, and climb, each moment earned through dedication and sheer will. Watching her conquer those small challenges always filled me with pride. There were times when she needed help, and that was okay. I was there for her, just as she was there for me, her smile, her laughter, the way she lit up every room she entered, it all made every struggle worth it. That afternoon, as I watched her reach the top of the jungle gym and wave triumphantly, my heart swelled. She was laughing, her bright blue eyes shining with joy. To me, it was a reminder of how far we'd come, how much she had overcome. She was living her life on her terms, not letting anyone or anything hold her back. But that sense of peace was shattered in an instant when the sound of a gunshot echoed across the playground. The sharp crack of it cut through the laughter and chatter, turning the happy scene into a nightmare. I froze, my blood running cold as I watched Harper lose her footing on the jungle gym. She tumbled to the ground, her body hitting the earth with a sickening thud. "Harper!" I screamed, running toward her, my heart pounding in my chest. My legs felt heavy, as if the world itself were holding me back. As I reached her, I dropped to my knees, panic seizing me. There was blood, so much blood, pooling beneath her, soaking into the ground around her. Her small body was limp, her breaths shallow and labored. The playground, a place of innocence and safety, now felt like a battleground. A battleground where Karen stood, the gun still in her hands, her expression cold and uncaring. She didn't rush over to help. She didn't show any sign of remorse or even concern. No, Karen just stood there, a sick smile playing at the corner of her lips, as if she had just done something righteous. "Karen!" I shouted, my voice hoarse with shock and disbelief. "What the hell is wrong with you?" She looked down at me with the same cold, calculating gaze she always wore, her grip tightening on the gun. "She needed to be taught a lesson," Karen said, her tone casual, as if she were discussing the weather. "She's a disturbance, just like you. This neighborhood doesn't need people like you making it worse." I couldn't understand. I couldn't process what she was saying. Karen was the president of the Homeowners Association, HOA, and for months, she had made it clear that she didn't approve of me, of our lifestyle, or of Harper's presence in the neighborhood. She had always been a thorn in my side, but this? This was something far worse than any complaint or criticism she had ever made. It wasn't just about Harper or me. Karen had always had a need to control. She saw herself as the ultimate authority, the one who made the rules, and the one who would enforce them. She had been harassing me for weeks, calling me and sending letters, demanding I keep Harper and our family in line. Karen had started using her position in the HOA to meddle in everyone's business, but her focus had shifted to us recently. It started with the complaints about Harper using the playground too much, the same complaints that had come from other neighbors who were too afraid to speak up. But Karen wasn't satisfied with just words. She wanted us gone. And she had taken it upon herself to make sure we knew she was the one in control. When I looked at Harper, lying on the ground, I realized that Karen had taken her power too far. Harper had done nothing wrong. She had just been a child trying to enjoy something she deserved. And now Karen, in her twisted obsession with control, had shot her, as if her life was nothing more than a nuisance to be eliminated. The tension in the air thickened. The playground was silent, except for the faint sound of Harper's labored breathing and my frantic sobs. Karen had crossed a line I didn't think anyone was capable of crossing. She wasn't just a petty HOA president anymore, she was a threat. She had proven that she would stop at nothing to get her way. And I knew, in that moment, I couldn't let her get away with it. "Please, God," I whispered, holding Harper close to me, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. "Please let her be okay." But even as I prayed, I knew that this was far from over. Karen had made her move, and now it was up to me to stop her. Harper's life was hanging in the balance, and Karen was standing there, satisfied with what she had done, laughing at the destruction she had caused. The fight had only just begun. The first time I saw Harper take her first steps, I was both overwhelmed with pride and fear. She was only 3, but her determination to move despite her cerebral palsy had always astounded me. Harper had always been different from other children, but not in the way people expected. She was never one to be defined by her disability, and I made sure she knew that. From a young age, I encouraged her to try, to fail, and to try again. It was more than just about walking or running, it was about living life fully, no matter what challenges came her way. Her early years were full of therapy sessions, doctor visits, and sometimes frustration. There were days when I watched Harper struggle, trying to put on her shoes with stiff fingers or hold a pencil that she couldn't grip properly. But each struggle was met with perseverance. Harper would smile, that beautiful smile of hers, the one that lit up her whole face, and she'd try again, never once letting the difficulty of her condition take away her joy. She'd often tell me, "I can do it, Mama," with such fierce determination that it made my heart swell with love. Harper's disability didn't make her weak. It made her stronger, and it made me stronger too. I became her biggest cheerleader, celebrating her victories no matter how small, because I knew how hard she worked for them. The first time she rode a bike, with training wheels, I felt a rush of emotion, pride, relief, and a deep, almost painful love. I had watched my daughter fight for the simplest of joys, and here she was, experiencing them just like any other child would. But life wasn't always so simple for Harper. We couldn't go to every park or every playground, because some places weren't accessible for her. It was always a bit harder for her to keep up with the other kids. The look of frustration on Harper's face when she couldn't climb the monkey bars or when she was left behind during games would break my heart. But that's when she would surprise me the most. Instead of giving up, she would find a way to adapt. She would find new ways to play, new ways to participate, and her laughter would fill the air as she proved that her disability was just a part of who she was, it wasn't her whole identity. I would watch in awe as she figured out how to make the best of every situation. In the midst of all this, we had Karen, the ever-present thorn in our side. Karen had been the president of the HOA for years, wielding her power like a weapon. She was the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, priding herself on keeping everything perfect. If there was a blade of grass out of place, a fence that was slightly crooked, or a resident who dared to break her version of the rules, Karen was there to impose her brand of order. Her obsession with control wasn't just about maintaining the neighborhood, it was about power. It was about Karen feeling like she could dictate how others lived. She prided herself on being the voice of authority, the one who told everyone what was acceptable and what was not. It wasn't enough for Karen to simply uphold rules, she had to enforce them with an iron fist. And the moment I moved into the neighborhood with Harper, I became one of her targets. It wasn't long before Karen began making small, subtle demands about how I should raise Harper. She didn't approve of the way I let Harper play, or the way I didn't limit her just because of her condition. Karen started showing up at my door with complaints. The first was about the noise from Harper's laughter when she played outside, too loud, apparently, for Karen's peaceful standards. I brushed it off, but Karen didn't. She made sure to point out that Harper's disability made her a distraction, and that the neighbors were starting to complain. It was clear from the start that Karen wasn't just uncomfortable with Harper being different, she resented it. It wasn't just about noise. Karen found fault with Harper's presence in the community, seeing her as an inconvenience rather than a joy. She often made snide comments about kids like Harper being disruptive or too much trouble. And the more Karen pressed, the more her manipulation showed. I realized that it wasn't about Harper. It was about Karen's need for power, her need to control everything, and, in Harper, she saw a challenge to that power. Karen didn't just target Harper because of her disability, she targeted her because she couldn't accept that Harper didn't fit into her perfect little world. Karen saw Harper's resilience as a threat. Harper refused to be hidden, to be less than anyone else, and that's what Karen couldn't stand. Every time Harper overcame another hurdle, Karen felt her control slipping away. She wasn't content to leave us alone. She wanted Harper to be something else, something she could mold, something that fit into her rigid idea of how things should be. As the days went on, Karen ramped up her attacks. It wasn't enough for her to make passive-aggressive comments anymore. She started contacting the HOA board, making vague accusations about how I was allowing Harper to disrupt the peace. She'd send letters, make phone calls, and even complain to other neighbors who had no issue with us, trying to turn the whole neighborhood against us. The tension was building, but Karen never once came to me directly. Instead, she waged her silent war from behind closed doors, using her influence to chip away at our peace, to make us feel like we didn't belong. I began to realize that this wasn't just about a difference in opinion. Karen's animosity ran deeper than that. She couldn't accept the way Harper fought for her place in the world, the way Harper refused to be defined by her disability. In Karen's eyes, Harper was a disruption, and people like her, people who didn't fit into her ideal world, were expendable. But Harper wasn't expendable. And I wasn't going to let Karen destroy the joy that my daughter had fought so hard to maintain. Karen had crossed a line when she shot Harper, and in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for my daughter's safety. I was fighting for her right to be herself, to live freely without someone trying to tear her down. The gloves were off now, and I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. Not for Harper. The moment Harper hit the ground, everything around me seemed to collapse. I rushed to her side, my breath coming in panicked bursts. My hands trembled as I pressed them against her wound, trying to stop the bleeding, but the shock of it all made it feel like I was moving in slow motion. Harper's small body was limp, and her eyes, usually filled with light, were now dim with confusion and pain. Her breaths were shallow, and I felt a deep, guttural fear that I couldn't shake. "Harper, stay with me," I whispered, my voice breaking. Tears blurred my vision as I held her close, feeling the warmth of her blood staining my hands. "Please, baby, stay with me." But there was no time to mourn or to fall apart. I knew I had to act, and I had to act fast. The playground, once filled with the laughter of children, was now eerily silent. I could hear distant murmurs from the few parents still lingering, some frozen in disbelief, others frantically calling for help. But none of them moved toward us, none of them tried to stop Karen. Instead, Karen stood a few feet away, watching the scene unfold in a disturbingly calm manner. She didn't rush to help, didn't seem alarmed in the least. Instead, she stood with her arms crossed, the gun still clutched in her hand as if it were just another tool in her arsenal of control. "Karen, what did you do?" I shouted, my voice cracking under the weight of the question. My heart was racing, my blood boiling in anger. "Why would you shoot her? She's just a child. My daughter. What the hell is wrong with you?" Karen didn't flinch. Her face was a cold mask of indifference, and as I looked into her eyes, I saw no remorse, only a twisted satisfaction, as if she had done something righteous. She was a disruption. "You and your daughter have made this neighborhood unbearable," she said, her voice eerily calm. "I gave you plenty of chances to fix it. You didn't listen. Now I'm fixing it." I felt my hands shake uncontrollably as I tried to steady myself, trying to hold on to Harper, praying for a miracle. How could she say that? How could she justify this? Karen was standing there, having just taken the life of my child with no hesitation, and she was acting like it was her right. The anger inside me was boiling over, but I couldn't afford to lose control. Harper needed me. I needed to get her to safety. "Please," I begged, looking desperately around for help. "Someone call an ambulance. Please." But Karen wasn't finished. She looked at the gun in her hand, and then at the crowd of parents who had begun to gather at the edge of the playground. Her eyes narrowed, and with chilling precision, she began to speak, her voice carrying to anyone who was listening. "Make sure you don't spread any lies," she said, her tone now laced with authority. "This was all a mistake. This woman," she pointed to me, "has caused nothing but trouble for this neighborhood. The HOA gave her plenty of warnings, and she ignored them. Her daughter's behavior, Harper, was the last straw. She was spinning her narrative, making it seem like Harper was the problem, like Harper's disability, something Karen had always found inconvenient, was the cause of this tragedy. Karen wasn't just defending herself, she was trying to manipulate everyone around us, making sure they saw me as the villain. The weight of her cruelty crushed me. She wasn't even trying to hide it. She was taking advantage of the situation, manipulating the moment to make me look like the one responsible for what had happened. I could hear the faint sound of sirens in the distance, but I felt like the world was spinning around me. Harper was slipping away, her breathing shallow and irregular, and all I could think was that I had to keep her alive. Karen had taken it too far. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was about power, control, and manipulation. Karen wanted to break me, to break my family, and she was using Harper to do it. The sirens grew louder, and as the ambulance arrived, I knew that the fight wasn't over. Karen hadn't just shot my daughter, she had shot the trust, the peace, the safety we all thought we had. Karen didn't just shoot Harper, she had shot at everything I had fought for, everything I had worked to build in this community. And now, she was going to try to get away with it. The EMTs rushed to Harper, moving swiftly but carefully. As they assessed her injury, I felt my body tense, my throat tightening with fear. I couldn't lose her. Not like this. "Stay strong, Harper, please," I whispered, brushing the hair from her face, trying to fight the panic that threatened to consume me. Meanwhile, Karen had stepped back, her posture stiff and defiant as she surveyed the scene. The community was watching, some of them in disbelief, others too stunned to move. I could see it in their eyes, they weren't sure what to think. Karen had her claws deep in this neighborhood, and it was clear that some people still believed her, still trusted her. The HOA, the rules, everything she had imposed on us, it was all about maintaining the image of control. As the EMTs worked to stabilize Harper, I could feel my anger rising. This wasn't about her pretending to be a lawmaker or some self-righteous figure trying to protect the community. Karen had used her position to attack us, to tear us down, and she would keep doing it unless I stopped her. The police had arrived by now, but Karen was already starting her version of events. She was a troublemaker, Karen was saying, as the officers took her statement. Her daughter was disruptive, and no matter how much I tried to reason with them, they refused to comply. This had to be done to protect the peace. My blood ran cold. She was using every bit of power she had to twist the situation, to manipulate it in her favor. Karen wasn't just a threat to Harper and me, she was a threat to the truth, to justice, and to everything we stood for. But I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Harper wasn't just an innocent victim in her eyes. She was a symbol, and so was I. If Karen thought she could break me with one cruel act, she was gravely mistaken. I looked over at Karen, whose expression remained cold and indifferent. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen had made a terrible mistake, and I would make sure the world knew the truth. The battle for Harper's life had just begun, and I wasn't going to let Karen win. The police took Karen in for questioning, but it was clear that this was only the beginning. Karen was trying to manipulate everything, but now it was up to me to expose her for what she truly was. Harper had been hurt, but we were going to fight for her. For us. And Karen would face the consequences of what she had done, no matter how much power she thought she had. The community, the truth, everything was on the line now. The days following Harper's shooting felt like a blur of chaos and uncertainty. The paramedics rushed her to the hospital, where doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize her, but I couldn't shake the haunting image of her lying there, her small body limp and covered in blood. Karen's actions had shattered the illusion of safety I had taken for granted. But even as I sat by Harper's bedside, nursing the fear that consumed me, something inside me began to stir. Karen had made a critical mistake, and I would make sure she paid for it. The initial shock of what had happened started to wear off, replaced by an urgent need to act. I knew I couldn't just sit around and wait for justice to be served. Karen was out there, spinning her version of events, and I couldn't trust that the authorities or anyone else would see through her lies unless I took matters into my own hands. It became clear that Karen wasn't just a regular neighbor with some petty complaints about noise. She was a force to be reckoned with. She had connections, influence, and an uncanny ability to manipulate everyone around her. Karen had been in charge of the HOA for years, years of power that she had used to control, intimidate, and bully people who didn't fit her narrow view of what the neighborhood should be. I had underestimated the reach of Karen's influence. When I reached out to a few neighbors, hoping they might help me gather evidence or offer support, I quickly realized how deep her hold ran. Many of them, despite knowing Karen's true nature, had turned a blind eye. They were either afraid of her, or they had bought into her carefully crafted image as the neighborhood's protector. Some neighbors expressed their sympathy but were reluctant to speak up, fearful that Karen would retaliate. I began to understand that this wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. Karen had created an environment of fear and intimidation that kept people silent. I knew I needed more than just the words of a few witnesses. I had to gather hard evidence, photographs, documents, anything that could expose Karen for what she really was. I started to gather statements from the parents who had been at the playground that day, hoping they could corroborate my story. But Karen's influence was showing its true power. As soon as I approached one of the parents, Jenna, she hesitated and then told me she couldn't get involved. She had seen Karen at a neighborhood event just a few days before, and Karen had made it very clear that anyone who spoke out against her would regret it. The more I pushed, the more it became clear, Karen was orchestrating a cover-up, and the people around her were either too intimidated or too complicit to do anything about it. Even the authorities, when I spoke to them, seemed hesitant. Yes, they were investigating the incident, but I could see the unease in their eyes. Karen had a history of influencing local law enforcement and the HOA, and they were walking on eggshells. Karen's manipulation was stronger than I had anticipated. Every time I tried to get a lead, it was either blocked or downplayed. She had turned the situation into a game of smoke and mirrors, making herself the victim of unfortunate circumstances and painting me as an unstable, overprotective mother. The more I tried to gather the pieces, the more it felt like Karen was one step ahead, erasing every trace of her actions and using her power to control the narrative. It was during one of these meetings, after I had spoken to a couple of parents who confirmed they had heard Karen's version of events, that I realized something. Karen wasn't just manipulating the story. She was manipulating the system. Her influence ran far deeper than I had understood, and her reach went beyond the neighborhood. The turning point came when I discovered that Karen had been using her position to cover up incidents in the past. I found out, through a series of phone calls to other parents and through an old HOA meeting transcript, that Karen had silenced other families who dared to challenge her authority. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern, a method of control she had used for years to intimidate anyone who might threaten her power. And now, Harper and I were the latest victims of her reign. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Karen had built her empire on fear and lies. And it wasn't just her actions I had to fight against, it was the system that had allowed her to do this for so long. If I wanted to protect Harper, if I wanted to make sure Karen faced consequences, I had to expose her manipulation, and I had to do it on my terms. That's when I made the decision to fight back with everything I had. I wasn't just going to rely on the authorities. I wasn't going to let Karen control the narrative anymore. I would expose her actions, her lies, and the way she had bullied this community into submission. I would dig deeper, find the evidence that Karen had tried so hard to bury, and show the world what she had done. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Karen had built her life around getting away with everything, and she wasn't going to go down without a fight. But I had a new sense of purpose. This wasn't just about seeking justice for Harper, it was about dismantling everything Karen had built. I had to stand up, not just for my daughter, but for the entire community that had been living in fear of Karen's power. And so, I started planning. I wasn't going to wait for the authorities or anyone else to do the work. This was my fight now, and I would see it through to the end. Karen had made a fatal mistake by underestimating me. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The day of the confrontation with Karen had arrived, and with it, the weight of everything I had been fighting for. Harper's recovery was slow but steady, and the community had finally started to wake up to the truth. But none of that mattered if I couldn't expose Karen for what she was, someone who had manipulated the system, used her power for years, and ultimately shot my daughter without remorse. I had gathered every piece of evidence I could find, witness statements, the photos from the playground, records of Karen's behavior, and even emails from parents who had been too afraid to speak up earlier. The more I dug into Karen's past, the clearer it became that she had been using her influence for years, silencing anyone who dared to challenge her authority. I had the proof. Now, it was time to face Karen directly and make sure she couldn't deny the truth any longer. The HOA board meeting had been scheduled for that afternoon. I knew Karen would be there, doing everything she could to spin her version of events, to paint herself as a martyr in a neighborhood that had wronged her. But this time, I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. This time, I was ready to expose everything. As I walked into the room, I saw Karen sitting at the front, her posture as stiff as ever. She had already begun talking to the board members, smiling her fake, controlling smile, as if nothing had happened. She had no idea what was coming. The room was tense, filled with neighbors who had shown up to finally take a stand, unsure of what to expect. I could see the uncertainty in their eyes, the lingering doubts they had about the truth of what had happened. But I wasn't there to back down. I was there to show them the truth about Karen and the danger she posed. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, my hands shaking, but my resolve stronger than ever. I knew this wasn't just for Harper. This was for all of us, for the people who had been too afraid to stand up to Karen. The people who had lived in fear of her wrath. This was for everyone whose lives she had touched, twisted, and broken. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I have something to say." Karen turned her head, her eyes narrowing as she saw me step forward. She had an air of calm arrogance, as if she thought she could control the situation, just like she always had. But today, I was in control. "I'm here to tell you the truth," I said, my eyes fixed on Karen. The truth about Karen and what happened at the playground. The truth about the lies she's been telling, the manipulation, and the power she's been abusing for years. Karen's face flushed with anger, but she didn't say anything. She couldn't. I was holding the cards now, and I wasn't backing down. "I've gathered all the evidence," I continued, turning to the board members. "I've spoken to witnesses. I've collected records. Karen shot my daughter, Harper, on that playground. She did it because Harper was a disruption, and because Karen thought she had the right to do so. She didn't care about the truth. She cared about control." The room went silent. I could feel the weight of every word hanging in the air, and I saw some of the board members exchange glances. Karen's smug expression faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered, standing up to interrupt. "That's not true." Karen spat, her voice sharp with frustration. "She's lying. I was protecting the neighborhood. It's her fault. She's the one who caused this. She's always been a troublemaker." But I wasn't finished. I pulled out the photos I had taken of the playground, of Harper lying in a pool of blood. I handed them to the board members, one by one, and watched as their faces shifted from confusion to disbelief. I showed them the emails from other parents who had complained about Karen's behavior. I displayed the records of the HOA's interventions in other homes, all marked with Karen's signature. "This," I said, "is the truth. Karen has been using her position to manipulate and control everyone around her. She's been abusing her power, threatening people, and now, she's shot my daughter." The board members were silent as they looked at the evidence in front of them. I could see the realization dawning on their faces. Karen's empire was crumbling. She couldn't spin the story anymore. The truth was too clear. Karen tried to regain control, but she was losing her grip. "This is all just a misunderstanding," she cried, her voice rising in desperation. "I'm trying to protect this neighborhood from chaos." But it was too late. The other board members were speaking now, murmuring among themselves, their eyes now fixed on Karen with growing suspicion. They had been afraid of her power, but now they were starting to see her for what she really was, a tyrant, a liar, and a manipulator who had used her position to destroy lives. Finally, one of the board members, Tom, stood up. His voice was firm as he addressed Karen. "Karen, we've seen the evidence. You've manipulated this situation for too long, and we can't allow this behavior to continue. You're relieved of your position as HOA president. You're no longer welcome in this community." I watched as Karen's face twisted in rage. The mask she had worn for so long had finally cracked. "You can't do this," she screamed. "I'm in charge here. I've always been in charge." But it was over. Karen had no power left. The board voted unanimously to remove her from her position. The community, for the first time in a long while, was free from her grip. As the meeting adjourned, the weight of everything that had happened began to sink in. Harper was still recovering, but now, there was hope. The truth had come out. Karen had been exposed for what she truly was. And I had won. I looked around the room at the people who had once been afraid, at the neighbors who had stood by and watched. Now, they were speaking up. They were starting to believe in the truth, and the fear that had once kept them silent was slowly being replaced by a sense of unity. Karen had taken the shot, but I had taken back control. The battle wasn't just for Harper, it was for all of us. And in that moment, I knew that no matter how hard Karen fought to break us, we would always come out stronger. The days after Karen's removal from her position in the HOA felt like a slow but deliberate return to normalcy. The shock of Harper's shooting, the chaos that had erupted in the community, and the fear that had paralyzed so many of us began to fade, but not without leaving behind scars that would take time to heal. Karen's influence, so deeply embedded in the neighborhood, was not easily shaken off, but with every step forward, I felt the weight of her control loosening.